It is April 3rd, 2025. And when it comes to how Trump will handle U.S. foreign policy on any given day, it seems as though your guess is as good as mine, right? We look at the way that he's handled things so far, the kind of temper tantrum that he's been throwing over Ukraine, over the fact that he's not getting the Ukraine war wrapped up and solved as quickly as he seemed to think that he was going to, the fact that Russia is telling him flat out, you're not paying attention to the root causes of this war. And he doesn't seem to be understanding what they mean by that. Well, as all that's happening, you also have Trump pursuing increasing tensions in the Middle East. We've got reports talking about the U.S. planning to help Israel bomb Iran. We've got the U.S. actively bombing Yemen right now and continuing to support an all out genocide against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So, where could things go from here? And where do things stand under the Trump administration? Well, we got into all of the latest with a special guest earlier, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Joe Lauria, an independent journalist and editor-in-chief of Consortium News. Joe, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Well, thank you for having me back on, Rachel.
Now, I want to get into a few things today, but I want to start with the war in Ukraine and kind of the latest there. I know that Trump is, of course, trying to rush a ceasefire and peace deal to end this war, he says. But Russia is once again pointing out the fact that while the US has come up with some ideas, they have yet to address the root causes of this war, which puts us right back in this place of the fact that any kind of a ceasefire could be used as a Minsk 3 style deal, freezing the conflict and then leading to more war later on. How do you view the way that Trump is handling this conflict? I mean, yes, he is talking to Russia, there's dialogue there, but at the same time, he's still supporting Ukraine and he's still continuing the war.
Yeah, well, first you're asking me to apply rationality to irrationality, and that's not always an easy thing to do. So I'm going to try. I see Trump's interest in Ukraine as very personal. I see almost all of his politics is personal. You have to remember he was impeached over what happened in Ukraine. He was trying to find out what shenanigans Joe Biden was up to then and the deep corruption he and his son were involved in. And he asked Zelensky for the dirt. He should have had maybe the Department of Justice to do that. And of course, the Democrats found out about it. That became the basis of an impeachment, a kind of ridiculous impeachment. And he wanted to get the dirt again on Biden. So this is for him, Ukraine, something he wants to get in there and stop it. He keeps saying, if I were president, what wouldn't happen? So he's blaming it on Joe Biden. Again, it's a politics, a personal politics. This is a man with street smarts, no doubt about it. Big deals all over the world in real estate. Negotiator, wheeler and dealer. He's not well educated on geopolitics, on history. I don't know how much he really understands about the origins of this conflict, the context that one has to put it in to understand it. Certainly, if he's reading the mainstream U.S. press, he's not going to learn that. That's their modus operandi, is to deprive the public in the United States and Western Europe as well from understanding why this conflict happened. Although then again, you see one day, about 4 weeks ago, Trump said to the press that he understood Russia's concerns about NATO expansion. He wouldn't have liked it either, something to that effect. So he has an inkling here or there. He's listening to some people. And you wonder if somebody like Tulsi Gabbard and even Robert Kennedy Jr., when they were candidates, they made very clear that they did understand the coup that happened in 2014 in Kiev. They understood NATO expansion. They understood the role of neo-Nazis in Ukraine. These are all the things that are now denied in the mainstream press, that don't exist. There's no neo-Nazi influence. There wasn't a coup. And NATO, what is NATO expansion? Who cares about that? So I don't know if he listened to them or if when he goes to play golf with Lindsey Graham on Sundays, he's listening to him, because Graham just is a co-sponsor, I think, in the last day or two, of new sanctions on Russia. He's one of the Republican co-sponsors of this bipartisan bill. So clearly there are neocons like Rubio as well who are going to be getting his ear. So his instincts sometimes are very good. I think he has a personal reason to want to solve this Ukraine war, but he doesn't know what he's talking about half the time, and that makes him susceptible to two things: to people who do know more, either whether from a nefarious or a positive point of view, and also his well, his vanity here gets in the way as well. So I think that Donald Trump is not the right negotiator. He thinks he's a great negotiator. He's trying to present himself on Ukraine as being somehow an honest broker. That he's going to bring these two sides together. He's pissed off at Putin now because Putin doesn't like Zelensky. I mean, this is like schoolyard level thinking. He's going to bring the two fighting kids together. The fact is, the United States has been arming, and as we now know, they were deeply involved in this war from the very start. They started the war. It's a war against Russia to try to get back to the control they had in the 1990s. And they had to get Russia to invade in order to unleash these economic and then sanctions, the economic war, the information war, the ground war, which the U.S. has been running from the beginning. It's failed. The Europeans cannot deal with that because they're going to have to leave office. It's the only way they can stay in power. They've invested too much of their own political capital in that. And here's Trump, who could be doing something really great. And we got inkling at the beginning that he would. And now we're only disappointed. So he doesn't understand the root causes of this conflict. And the Russians need him to in order to get a deal.
Yeah, and exactly as you're pointing it out there. I mean, I think we saw some of the red flags when Trump was on the campaign trail, and he seemed to think that, oh, all we have to do is just get Putin and Zelensky in a room and get them to talk it out, and then that will solve everything. And it's like, oh no, this is a much deeper and more complicated conflict with that. And the US is not the side that is going to bring everyone together and broker a deal. The US is directly involved in creating this conflict. Now, as you have all of that happening, you also have the NATO alliance, which is, according to reports, is kind of freaking out over the fact that there are talks happening between the US and Russia amid concerns that Trump could be losing interest in NATO. Now, I want to get your take on these tensions within NATO because, I mean, it's no secret that Trump isn't too fond of people like Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer. I think the feeling is mutual there, but is there a chance of the US pulling out of the NATO alliance, of Trump making that decision? And is that something that's even possible when it comes to the way that things currently stand?
We'd like to think that he could and that he would. He said to the press a couple weeks ago that he didn't think Russia was a threat to Western Europe, that Russia was going to invade Europe. And this is the only thing the Europeans have now to stoke that absolute nonsense that was nonsense during the first Cold War. When we got all the bomber scares, the bomber gap, the missile gap, all the Russians are coming nonsense. The Soviet Union was rebuilding itself after the absolute devastation. I mean, the East Germans were upset because they were taking a lot of resources from East Germany to rebuild Russia. There was no plan to invade Europe. But that was what the Cold War was founded on, this fear. And it's come back again. It's come back again because European leaders like Ursula and Macron and Starmer and all these very weak characters who could only exist on fear mongering. And as I said, they invested too much in this war. They thought they were going to win. I mean, you remember Lloyd Austin said the purpose of this war, it was to weaken Russia. He said that 2 weeks after Russia's intervention in 2022. So, and in Warsaw that around that same time, Biden said the purpose of this war is to overthrow Putin. He said it, and then they had us. Oh no, he didn't mean that. Well, of course he did. That's what the purpose is. And these guys, Macron is a real slippery character because he was going to Moscow a couple times before Russia's intervention. He seemed to be the only one who had an open mind. He seemed to think he understood Russia. He wanted to at least understand Russia's point of view, which is diplomacy, right? Put yourself in the other's shoes. He did all of that. And then he also, about 2 years ago, he had a dinner at the presidential palace in Paris with Schultz. Schultz and Macron sat down with Zelensky, and they told him, it's over. You've lost. You've got to make a deal right now. You're not going to win this war. And he even said, Macron, to Zelensky that, even enemies like Russia and Germany, and they were sitting there with him, made up after all the wars, the Franco-Prussian War, the First World War, the Second World War. Here is France and Germany together. You're going to have to make up with Russia. This was leaked to the Wall Street Journal. It was a big story. It's forgotten now. And here's Macron saying, with Starmer, the boots on the ground, planes in the air, and we're going to rebuild the economy that was destroyed in Europe because they went along with the American sanctions against Russia, which destroyed their economy and not Russia's. that they're going to rebuild it through militarization of the continent. I mean, this is so dangerously and stupid. And I just wonder how many people can see through this. And I think there are quite a few, but there are too many who believe the mainstream uh, jargons here and everything that these people are saying. Macron, Starmer, Schultz, Baerbock, who fortunately we're going to lose. Although I see she's going to become the Secretary General of the UN. I worked 25 years at UN headquarters. I'm glad I'm not there anymore because I would have to deal with her. So anyway, it's a big mess. NATO should have never existed anymore after the end of the Cold War. Even during the Cold War, its whole purpose of existence was the Russian threat, which I was just saying was a hoax back in the first Cold War, and certainly is now, even if Russia wanted to invade, even if Putin was this Hitler-like figure, was taking the Sudetenland and then Poland and all this rubbish we're hearing. They don't have the capability of doing it. And everything that Russia has done is to avoid conflict with NATO. I mean, they're not stupid. They're not reckless. The stupid and reckless ones are in the capitals of London and Paris and Berlin, unfortunately. And they're going to keep this going. So NATO shouldn't have existed at the end of the Cold War. It has no reason to exist now. It should go away. To answer your question, no, I don't think Trump's got it in him to actually do it. He's got the right ideas, the right instincts, but he's got Lindsey Graham in a hole number 9 telling him don't do it. And he's got Rubio and all this whole built up people. Don't forget American politicians also. Their entire careers and built on these anti-Russian thinking, a good deal of it anyway, on the foreign policy. China as well, of course. So I don't think he's going to do it, no.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And it's interesting to watch as you're seeing everything that NATO is doing, everything that you laid out there. These are the security concerns that Russia has been talking about for years, right? When Russia has been saying, hey, we need these root causes addressed. We're not just talking about the issues that have come up in the last 3 years. No, we're talking about decades now of fighting back and forth and ongoing tensions. And, speaking of the mess that there is in NATO, I also want to turn to the mess that is over in the Middle East right now, as you had Donald Trump, of course, he campaigned again, ending the endless wars. He threw in that he was going to bring peace to the Middle East. Oh, and then all of a sudden he turns right back around and he has the U.S. openly bombing Yemen, the poorest country in the Middle East, killing dozens of civilians there as they're openly targeting heavily populated civilian infrastructure. Yet, although these bombings so far have led to no signs from the Houthis or from Nasrallah that they are going to stop their blockade on Israel-linked ships in the Red Sea, you have the White House claiming that the strikes have been, quote, incredibly successful. So what is the message that this sends to the American people when Trump literally goes from peace in the Middle East one day to let's have another endless war and really ramp this back up, when at least involving Yemen, there was some peace and they were happy to have it as long as there was a ceasefire in Gaza?
In trying to understand this inexplicable man, Donald Trump, I have an advantage having grown up in New York City like he did. He's a bit older than I am, but I grew up in a borough and I grew up in the Bronx, grew up in Queens. Why am I saying this? Because he talks like he's still living there. If you listen to when he had the Jordanian king in the White House, they had this discussion. That's when he revealed his great plan that he was going to move them all out of Gaza and build new housing for them. It was going to be wonderful, beautiful housing. And he mentioned a couple of times that right now they can't live there because horrible the conditions, that they're getting knifed. They're getting knifed and they're getting mugged. And I'm thinking, what the hell is he talking about? No, they're getting bombed with 2,000-pound bombs that the Americans are providing them, and they're getting hit with tank shells, and they're getting starved. But there's nobody getting mugged. If only the people in Gaza were only dealing with muggings, right? That we would be in good shape. Why is he saying that? Because he's thinking like a real estate developer in the South Bronx that is full of these broken down buildings and ghettos and muggings, and he's going to clean it all out and build new housing for these people. That's the way he approaches Gaza. Now, you may think I'm crazy. A lot of people may disagree with me, but that's my understanding of Donald Trump's talking about Gaza. This is the level that he's looking at. And of course, when he talked about that, when Netanyahu showed up Remember when he talked about this plan and Netanyahu was couldn't stop smiling? And he's
Mhm.
now openly talking about implementing Trump's plan. He said that the other day. Now they're admitting that they're going to kick all the people out of there little by little, which the former defense minister of Yalon, I forget his first name here, said back in December, he said, we are ethnically cleansing northern Gaza. And the people went crazy in Israel on TV. It was a big scandal. How dare this? He's mentally ill. An MP, a member of the Knesset, said that Yalon, this former defense minister, was mentally ill and he needed help. Now Netanyahu is saying the same thing openly. They were saying it before in coded message, like making references to the Old Testament genocides, right? But now they're just saying it openly because they got Trump to do this plan. So Yemen is an Israeli project. Israel has limited military capabilities. They are spread thin now in Syria, bombing Lebanon again, and now resuming bombing Gaza. Can they spare planes to go down to stop the Houthis from trying to interfere with the naval traffic, the merchant ships on the Red Sea going towards Israel? No, they need the United States. And not only do they use U.S. Planes to do this, but it is a typical Israeli type of hit. There's the guy you want to get in the building, bomb the whole building, and kill everyone in there. And you usually find out he wasn't even there, right? That happens very often. So that
Mhm.
was Israel planned that whole thing, and U.S. implemented it. And that's when they invited this journalist who is an Israeli himself, actually, the Israeli American journalist Goldberg, to go in and listen to this call. And they were all whooping it up like any kind of uh, macho American Bushes, everybody, even Obama, I'm good at killing people. The same goddamn awful American leadership mentality of killing people so wantonly because we are the best and we are the most powerful. So Trump's going to, unfortunately, try to implement this ethnic cleansing plan, and Netanyahu is doing it. And this is a unmitigated disaster, way beyond anything we've experienced for decades in terms of the horror of war. Maybe since the Cambodian genocide, I think. That's probably the worst thing since this is Gaza. And Trump's facilitating it because he wants to clean down the ghettos and give them nice new housing so they don't get knifed and mugged anymore.
Yeah, that is a really good point, and I had not even thought of it like that when it came to his language, because I remember hearing that at the time and kind of going, okay, an interesting way to describe it. Maybe he's using that as a metaphor. Maybe he thinks that it's happening literally, but yeah, he has no idea. And he's also not paying attention to the fact that, when Israel decided that they were going to respond to the October 7th attacks, it was all about, we are going to quote unquote defeat Hamas. Well, over a year later, you've carried out plenty of genocide. You haven't defeated Hamas. It does not appear that that is anywhere on the table. And yet, as you were pointing out there, now Israel is adopting the language that we heard from Trump, right? They're talking about seizing more land in Gaza, claiming, oh, we need it for the expanded security corridor. And if I'm any of the countries in this region, right, just pick one, I would be starting to get concerned right now because while Biden, was a self proclaimed Zionist, he gave Israel the green light in a number of different areas. Trump is doing it in a way that he's almost boasting about it, right? He's openly threatening that he's going to bomb Iran. He clearly does not care about the Palestinians, even though he's presenting it as he's going to ship them off to some sort of a resort and then, make over their land. But what are your concerns right now for the direction that the Middle East is headed in under Trump's direction and how Netanyahu is going to use that to his favor?
Yeah, well, first I want to say I don't think Israel wants to defeat Hamas right now. Even if they could. I don't. And why is that? Because let's say they defeated him now. What do they do with all these people now? How are they going to get them out? How are they going to? What excuse will they have to keep killing them to drive them out? So I think they need Hamas to be there so that you could use the excuse of fighting Hamas in order to make all this absolute extermination possible. Ultimately, if they want to take over Gaza, they're going to have to defeat Hamas. But that I think can come at the end. The main thing is to get most of the people killed or driven out. And I think this is so horrific. The difference between Biden and Trump is only in the theatrics of the thing. If you remember, Biden, they had an election to win, and they knew that a good part of the Democratic Party was horrified by what Israel was doing, and not. And so he had to accommodate that wing. So they made these noises. Oh, we're gonna telling them don't bomb Rafah, don't do this. Oh, we're gonna withhold one 2,000-pound bomb. It was all BS to try to win the election. So he was just as committed to the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, in my opinion, or overall Palestine, as Trump is. Trump's just openly saying it because that's what Trump is. He doesn't understand the nuances here, and he thinks his base agrees with that. But I wonder about that. Now his base doesn't like the involvement in the Ukraine war because of the waste of money, whatever the reasons. I don't know how they feel about Gaza so much. I don't think they're all that keen on it, but I haven't really seen polling or anything to indicate that. The overall direction of the Middle East, well, Netanyahu, this is step one for him. He's got Trump and the U.S. military to bomb 200 sorties or whatever attacks on Yemen now, right? And it's not, despite what the White House press spokeswoman said, is not having an effect. The Houthi were not controlled by Iran at any point, really, from the beginning in particular. Yemen was awash with weapons, as the British ambassador used to say at the UN. They didn't need weapons from Iran, and they are a different branch of Shia Islam than Iran, which is something. But they've been driven closer together by the Saudi attacks, and now here. There's no question about that. They're much closer now. It's very much like the way the Americans drove Cuba closer to the Soviet Union. This type of thing, or the forced a nationalist Vietnam to become closer to communist China or communist Russia. So I think if they got them to the U.S. to do Yemen, them being Netanyahu and his gang, then the next step is to try to get what he's been asking for 20 years, which is to attack Iran. And this is what Lindsay is on about. And good thing his friend McCain isn't around to be saying bomb, bomb, bomb Iran, because this is the ultimate prize. They wanted Saddam taken out. They got him taken out. This is Israel. They wanted ultimately Bashar al-Assad in Syria to be taken out. He's out. And the extremists are in, unbelievably, which is what that whole war was about for 10 years, not some democratic Syrian revolution. They wanted Gaddafi out. He's gone. So everybody Israel has wanted out is pretty much gone right now. Lebanon, well, they killed Nasrallah. He's gone. So the last one is the Iranians, except they're the strongest power they're going to face with. They now have a pact with Russians as well. Everybody speculates how's Russia going to react to that. Nobody really knows. Israel needs the final pin to fall will be the Iranian leadership. They can't do it. Like, they can't even bomb Yemen because they're stretched thin. They certainly, even when they weren't stretched thin, have the capability on their own to attack Iran. They need the U.S. This is the million-dollar question. Will Donald Trump be stupid enough to do this?
Yeah, it really is the million-dollar question. And, as I'm watching the way that Trump is handling things, I'm going, okay, he has to understand, or at least I would hope that someone in his circle would make it clear. If you bomb Iran, if you create this regional war, all hell is going to break loose across the Middle East, right? We've already have militias across Iraq that are talking about, hey, guess what? We've got all these US bases. They're all going to become targets. But beyond that, you have the Persian Gulf, an incredibly important region of the world for shipping. It's going to send energy prices skyrocketing. The list just goes on and on there. And when it comes to kind of the limits that Trump is willing to push, it really makes me wonder. I don't have, I can't look at him and say, oh no, he would never do that. Or yes, he would absolutely do that. The last thing I want to ask you, when it comes to the American people and how they're looking at the Trump administration and its foreign policy, how do you see that right now? Because Trump can say, we're talking to Russia, we're making progress on Ukraine, but at the same time, he's also bombing Yemen, threatening war with Iran. He's not bringing peace to the world. In fact, he's sending tensions soaring all over the place.
I think their heads are spinning like most observers. What is this guy really up to? What's going on? And don't forget these tariffs that are a big part of his trade policy, which is relations with other states. Now, He's just announced 10% on at least minimum every country in the world, thinking he can rebuild an industrial base. And that will take a long time. And in the meantime, he's destroying the economy. Basically, he's going to hurt the economy. So the conventional wisdom is American voters, like voters in many countries, vote with their pocketbooks, with their the economics will determine this. So I don't think they're going to be happy that he started a new war, if they're really anti-war. And they're not going to be happy that, well, it's not a new war, but he got a new phase of this war against Yemen that Biden also had his go at it. And the economy, he's going to really weaken the economy. People on Wall Street are not happy with him because they're at Wall Street's way down. And the tariffs at the bottom of that, and his bellicosity and the dangers of a war with Iran will be the end of the world economy, or at least a severe depression probably would come, as what all analysts say about, if the oil can't get out of the Persian Gulf. And Iran blocks that. Plus, Iran can strike at all the Saudi oil facilities around the eastern coast of Saudi Arabia on the Gulf, where the Shia live also in Saudi Arabia, where the Iranians have some, affinity there. So they could easily bomb those. They did a couple of years ago, if you remember. You remember Iranians struck those oil? I mean, that was like, wow. Who could believe that was going to really happen? And it shocked everyone. There was no response. The Saudis didn't attack Iran. The Israelis didn't attack Iran. The United States, they just sort of looked at it. So they better remember that. I just remembered it. I hope Trump remembers, and the Pentagon remembers, because that's what they're asking for. And then the end of the oil price, the end of the whole economy is going to be absolutely all over the world devastated by a war with Iran. And so that they even talking about it is ridiculous. But they are. So let's see.
Yeah, exactly. I know we're early on, just a couple of months into Trump's second term, but there is certainly a lot at stake here all around. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to break down all of the latest here. Joe Lauria, an independent journalist and editor-in-chief of Consortium News, thank you so much for your time and insight.
I appreciate it, Rachel. Thank you.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also check out Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Rachel Blevins. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.